Faith in love starts with faith in you. Know yourself to grow yourself. And discover the DNA of love with Dr. Williams every Wednesday at 4 p.m.
Give love.
Today's topic is the DNA of online dating. So we're going to go into some of the pitfalls of online dating, why it's a struggle for a lot of folks, and then we're going to also hit on some of the benefits, because that's one of the less commonly discussed aspects of online dating. And then we're going to talk about how to possibly navigate doing it effectively, depending on what you're actually even looking for in a person or in a circumstance.
And I know, a while back, we talked even about some of the benefits of online dating, of you can set preferences to, hey, if I want to find out more about, I have this interest in this thing, I'm going to go set my location to where this thing is. So I know you're going to have a lot of helpful tidbits and hints for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, drop that pin in Guam, If you want to find a specific place in Greece that you like, or maybe you're a big Lord of the Rings fan and you want someone who really loves New Zealand, you can actually do these things, which is actually beneficial. But before we get into the benefits, let's look at those landmines that we talked about before, as far as the many things that can harm the dating, strategy or approach for a person from a online dating standpoint. I think one of the biggest things that it's not really discussed too often is research literature kind of speaks to this, is that there's often a false sense of availability of options and self-desirability based on perceived success on social media. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes.
So the idea of feeling like, because there's so many, billions of people on this planet, that, if you're matching successfully with multiple people, it means that you are automatically desirable to X amount of people. And if you are not matching with X amount of people, then you are not desirable, and both are untrue. But we solidify those beliefs over time because we pelt ourselves over and over with these different left and right swipes as far as it goes when it comes to dating.
And I feel like this is just a general thing with social media. A lot of those things will tell you exactly how many matches you have. And if you feel like, I got 2 matches, they could be 2 great matches. But you're going to be like, I only got 2? Because I feel like now, with Facebook and Instagram, we get so used to the higher the number, the more valuable it is. Yeah,
quantifying my value based on how many people have pressed the button on their phone. And that dates me a little bit because no one's pressing buttons anymore. But you know what I mean? As far as the idea of if I've matched with 50 people, let's say, this idea, especially if I'm coming from a perspective of not having been in a circumstance where I felt desirable historically, my ego has the potential to be vastly inflated, thinking I now have 50 options, when most of us really don't. Most of us, and when I say don't, I don't mean you can't. I mean, typically, most of us are looking for specific qualities in a person, whether we know it or we don't. We're looking for them. And this idea that because of, Tinder or Bumble or Hinge or Raya, if you're really famous, I guess, these matches giving me this feeling of hey, this is my value. And the flip side of that is if I don't match with any, I think about a friend of mine back in the States who, when I was using online dating platforms, and he was too, I remember him saying he was struggling. He was struggling. He was like, man, women they aren't any good. I'm swiping and they just they're not, the fish aren't biting, And I remember, first of all, feeling speak for yourself. That's definitely not my experience. But second to that, I was maybe his criteria from a search perspective is a little off. And maybe it's not because he's not desirable, it's because he's casting his bait in a pond where the fish are not necessarily, as he said, biting. At the time, he was in his mid-30s, and this is kind of creepy, but he had his age range set from 18 to 22. And he was like, well, why aren't any of the quote-unquote fish biting? And I was like, because you're 35. And a lot of these quote-unquote fish, as you refer to them, are in school.
Yep.
Meeting people their own age. it's not that you're not desirable, you're just looking in the wrong pool.
And I think that too brings up a good point. It's like a lot of these apps, they give you an age range. If you limit yourself, sometimes you might just be missing the person because, well, they're not in my age range that I would think. And
Absolutely.
I feel like, you know, if you think about, okay, what am I looking for in a relationship? If you're looking for a long-term relationship, having your pool maybe to 18 to 22 years old, you're not going to find people who are necessarily seeking, you know, finding the one.
And it can be done, but it doesn't mean it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Hugh Hefner was very, very old, and he was able to manage much, much younger suitors, we'll call them. But doesn't mean it was a great thing for the relationship individually, and doesn't mean it worked. It was what it was, but it didn't necessarily equate to love and a strong connection. And truly, all these circumstances overall, if you deal with like even the nuance of what we're discussing in this like brief 5 minutes, if you're dealing with all of that and then you're unsuccessful or you get ghosted, now we find many avenues where our self-esteem can take hit after hit after hit while we try to continue to find love, which is how a person ends up in their 40s and jaded and thinking like, oh my gosh, like love doesn't exist. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Someone say love doesn't exist. Like, what a very sad place to be. And I'm not judging that person. If you feel that way, maybe you have a reason to. It's not accurate.
And also, too, I feel like that is just like, maybe in your life, romantic love may never be a thing that you even strive to look for, but you can find love in other places.
Yeah.
So for me, when you say love doesn't exist, I'm like, well, that's sad, because I have friends that I absolutely love and I lean on and they support me and I support them. Like, love comes in different forms.
Absolutely. And we need it. So this idea that it doesn't exist is it's like saying, well, food doesn't exist. Well, whether you think so or not, it does. And you need it. So I want to hit on another point as far as like the presentation, and you see this with social media too, from Instagram to TikTok to any other app where you are posting pictures and video, where it creates a degree of unrealistic beauty or aesthetic expectations for yourself and for the people you're swiping right or left on. You see, when I was on dating apps, it was like, I won't say the year because I don't want to make myself sound too old, but definitely I saw so many people with doctored photos. Like so many. I saw people that I knew from my school who I was like, you don't look this way. Like, I'm bald. Like, if you see me in a photo with a full head of hair, you know something's up. And I would see folks like that who were or I knew guys who had, one of my teammates, we called him shirt off. Because everywhere he went, he found a way to squeeze his shirt off. Somehow. Parties, dorm rooms, it didn't matter. He had abs and he wanted people to know. And what he didn't tell people in his like dating apps was his abs were flex time only. So they only showed up when he was trying really hard. And in all his photos on social media, he was flexing. And he looked like really, really cut. But I knew him as beer belly. Like, I knew him as the guy who sucks in on all his photos. He didn't present that way, and the people who were swiping right on him didn't see that until they met him in person, and it felt like it was too late.
Yep.
So it's fun, but I mean, deeper than that, you have that aesthetic risk, and then you have risk of bigger things like fidelity concerns once you actually find the person, because of what we said earlier, the false sense of multiple options.
Yep.
It can become addicting at times, and we're human. We all have egos. We feel like options are plentiful and like forever lasting. We might start to believe it and actually like lose sight of like what true love even looks like when you find it in a person.
Yes. And I know we're going to dive more into this topic because we are talking about online dating. So what do we want to discuss next? So
you're not wrong. The idea of a one night stand is one of those things that there are many mixed feelings about, but one thing online dating does is it makes it really easy, and sometimes that's not a great thing. But we talked about some of those pitfalls before. But some of the benefits is even though the convenience of online dating does contribute to some degree of the one night stand or the limited emotional investment because of the illusion of multiple options, we do see some degree of compatibility matching that's increased when you have the options to be able to start to scrutinize or like truly funnel out your dating prospects. Looking at people from a candidacy standpoint versus like options. Like random options are, I mean, they're cool, but it's like going to a grocery store. You kind of want to know what's down each aisle. And when it comes to actually choosing the person you're supposed to be with, or at least looking for that in online dating, you can more aggressively be selective in which aisle you're walking down. So if you happen to be lactose intolerant, stay away from dairy. If you happen to want vegetables, then live your celery life, you know? But if you do want something a little bit more raunchy, the alcohol aisle is down the street. So like choosing the best, metaphorically speaking, the best aisle within the grocery store of the life of online dating is a helpful prospect for folks who are just trying to figure it out.
And I feel like that can be so hard, because if you go on online dating, it's like, well, I don't want to like limit my options. I'm going to say yes to everything. But they actually, you know, the more you look, they have filters. Hey, like, I'm not interested in anyone who smokes. So you can just get rid of anyone who smokes.
Poof.
Gone.
No pun intended. You know, the funny thing is that, at least based on the research, and this is a study I looked at yesterday, actually, it was from 2020, that males far more often than females choose to reach out and start communication without looking at the profile of the person they match at a far greater rate than females do. So females actually, based on the research literature, actually demonstrate a capacity to want to dig deep and do their investigative work into who they're actually talking to before reaching out to someone and speaking with them on like online dating platforms or social media, which is why things like Bumble even became a thing.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. And just in my personal experience, like when I was in my early 20s and like friends and I, like when we was sitting around swiping, the only question that went around was, is she cute? That's pretty much the end of our research when it comes to the context of who we're actually looking at.
Though I will say these apps are getting a little too scary for me in the standpoint of you can link your Instagram, your Facebook, your Spotify, and people can just go and be like, oh, here's all the music they listen to.
It's too much. It's like baseball cards for humans. Too many stats for a person, and at some point you have paralysis by analysis too. But the beauty of that is if you were looking to conduct some form of, I guess, surface level or partially deep analysis, you have the diversity in the dating pool to do that, and then the geographical like options for like someone who lives in the middle of like Wichita Falls, or if I'm in Montana and I don't necessarily want to date someone from my high school, like I can actually expand and possibly meet someone who lives in Paris. I can meet someone who's possibly in Alaska. I can give myself a fighting chance by expanding the parameters of who I even see on a day-to-day basis. Sure, that comes with pitfalls, but the opportunities I think are worth it. And
I want to bring up one of the big things about online dating is, yes, it's easily accessible. You can like download any app and start. But I feel like there's some benefits that we don't think about. And that is, yes, you can pick your locations, but I feel like it's a great way to meet people without the actual face-to-face. So you kind of have a protection of, okay, I'm not vibing with this person. I'm going to just say, hey, sorry, this is not working out. You can block them. And block them. You can pull the parachute. One of my favorite comedians, Jim Norton, he's in his mid-50s, and he was on Raya, I think it was. He has a girlfriend now, but I've been following him for years, and for a long time he had no girlfriend, and he had been struggling in New York and complaining and primarily blaming women for his own personal shortcomings, which is a whole nother topic, but he was constantly talking about the amount of times where he's starting a conversation with somebody and he's like, this is going well, and then he gets blocked before the conversation even gets into what he was hoping for was dinner, maybe lunch. But usually these people were likely Googling him and saying that his comedy is pretty debaucherous and like he was into some kind of, let's just say, interesting stuff that maybe a lot of the population of the females that he was looking into dating weren't into. And I think that is
for him, it was a detriment, for sure. Like, nobody wants to be ghosted. But for folks who are still dipping their toe into this new dating thing, it does give you a parachute. It gives you a way out.
I think, too, for a lot of people here, even at Aviano, it's kind of a nice safety net to have when you're dealing with not just people from the base, but also local nationals. And, you know, you may not understand the culture as much. And so I do know a few people who they don't realize some of the cultural things that happen in dating for a lot of Italians that maybe a lot of Americans don't do.
Yeah. There was when I was in my master's program in DC, I met this girl off of, I want to say, I cringe to say it, but it might have been Tinder. It might have been Tinder. And I know her, I said her name to my wife last night, and because it just came back to me. I know her first and last name because it stood out to me. Won't say it now, but I definitely know it. And there was a situation where it reinforced how convenient online dating can really be. Like social based apps or app based dating can actually be. And it was one of those things that where I was in class from 1 to 4 in DC, and then I had another class from 7 to 10. I had a 3-hour gap, and I needed to both get some food and possibly go on a date. And it made me realize how truly Uber Eats and Tinder were not that different contextually, at least for me at the time. Like,
what do I feel like today? McDonald's or
kinda, because I remember I wanted to eat, and I also knew this girl who was at Georgetown, which is maybe like a 20-minute walk from where my classes were, and I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. She has a sorority house where they're cooking, so I went down there and got a chance to have my first date, which is I don't recommend. I went to their sorority house. Horrendous idea, because I'm just meeting this person for the first time in their sorority house, so that's already bad news. But I get there, and in hindsight, I recognize that like online or app-based dating gives you the capacity to be able to do your professional life while still trying to compatibility match or find dating. Like, I was able to go to school. I went to her house for a date that didn't go well. And I was fed, which was nice. They had chicken nuggets, which was cool. But I was also able to make it back to class by 7 within a 3-hour period. And then we never talked again. Was it a love match? Obviously not. But it gave me the flexibility to be able to hit my classes, like go on a date, get a free meal, and then also make it back to class, and then later on that night back to home to work the next day. So a long-winded way of saying that one of the major convenience factors for app-based dating is recognizing like, oh my gosh, it actually gives me a chance to still pursue my career, my academic pursuits. If I have kids, I can start to plan my life socially around things that matter to me internally while also pursuing love at a distance.
Yeah, and I think, you know, online dating has gotten a very negative reputation. And yes, there are, you know, my grandparents, I always kind of tease them. They love like their Datelines, their 2020s, all the crime, and it's like they met on a dating app and everything seemed okay until. So I feel like the media has actually been flooded with a lot of these negative things that sometimes when there's so much negativity out, you just kind of forget, hey, these are the positives, because I think people fixate on negative things. Yeah,
and it's a natural human response to fixate on the negative, because the negative is what can hurt you, and most people keep fixations on things that keep them safe. But which is why like dating apps have gotten the reputation of like DeVry University or like University of Phoenix. Like, and I'm not disparaging. Like my sister-in-law has a degree from University of Phoenix, and I'm proud of her. But like contextually speaking, when you look at like how people use these things as frame of references for things that are not good, you constantly build a perception that they're not helpful when all there are tools. Your degree from University of Phoenix is as valuable as you make it if you pursue something effective with it. And a dating app like Tinder is as useful as you make it if you pursue something valuable with it. And if all you're pursuing is one night stands, hence the last song and the last break, then that's all you're going to find. Yeah, your physical intimacy or your body is not all I want unless it's all you have to offer, and vice versa. So if you're in a position where you have that tool, use it in a way to build something like gorgeous.
So let's talk a little bit more. Give some advice to our listeners out there of how to use these dating apps effectively.
So the biggest component is to be honest. Like, present yourself effectively and accurately. Because if you're going to present yourself effectively from an aesthetic or beauty standpoint, recognize that you save yourself a conversation or at least an awkward introduction later on. Like, if I'm a certain weight, I'm bald, I'm not going to take a bunch of pictures with hats on. Trying to doctor up my beauty from a distance.
Photoshop the Rock hairstyle from the famous fanny pack photo.
Yeah, he just really loves bandanas, like Hulk Hogan. Like, no, I'm gonna actually take care of myself and save myself a misrepresentation by presenting myself exactly the way I look in real life, which is a hard thing to do from an ego standpoint, even harder thing to do from a self-esteem standpoint for a lot of folks. But then more so than how you look, represent your intentions accurately too. So if you're pursuing only physical intimacy, and when I say intimacy, primarily I'm not talking about love, I'm talking about just physical means of, let's just say, gratification. State that clearly and make it very known and transparent, because if you have that transparency, then you connect with people who are looking for that too. But if you are actually seeking love, or you want to truly be in love, like, be honest about it. Don't try to backdoor your way into love. If you do, you're going to get your feelings hurt, or you're going to hurt somebody else over time. The biggest of all, hello, be safe. like you said something beautiful a second ago, is that, like, there's so many new things for a new airman specifically too, or a new person in a new country. There's new aspects of being in Italy or Germany or any country you might be. Recognize that the person you're talking to might not even be them. I saw the Manti Teo documentary on Netflix a little while ago, as far as like how bad catfishing can be. Don't fall in love with the image, fall in love with the person. And do your research beforehand by extending conversations more than a couple days.
And I think, too, for just us and specifically being in Italy, understand the dating norms of the country that you're in. Because I can tell you, I know a few people who have gone on dates not knowing anything about the dating culture for Italians, and then being like, oh, you want that? No, I'm not for that. And it just doesn't end well.
I've heard of, like, and this is not me, this is just things I've heard, so I could be wrong, but I've heard, at least culturally here, and in other places too, where there's a strong Catholic background, like this idea of pushing more of a traditional understanding of relationships, where being, like, having marriage being the goal right off the bat is a norm. And if you don't know that, and then you misrepresent yourself on social media or on app-based dating platforms, then you give your audience a really skewed perception of what you're looking for. And then if there is a circumstance where, I don't want to say a mistake, but let's just say a baby gets here and you didn't mean for it to happen. Like, now you have a situation where you are in love, potentially on the surface, with the situation, but then your heart is not necessarily in line with that. So babies are great, but let's try to have them on purpose as much as we can. But then biggest thing about safety is, if you can, recognize that an acquaintanceship does not mean that you know the person. So if you are dating someone from a dating app, like, try your best to meet in wide open places. These sound like no-brainers too, but like, trust me, you definitely have to say them explicitly. Like, meet in open places. Meet where there are people who can also keep you safe. Try not to give out any personal information that's not necessary on these apps. Keep the conversation on the app and not moving them to Instagram, to phones, to actual apartments or homes. And if you're going to pursue long-term relationships, like, recognize that it takes some time to build trust. So just knowing a name and thinking a person's nice is not enough to say, I know this person. And hopefully, if you do those things, you can at least give yourself a fighting chance to say, the date was cool, not a love match, but I'm still in the game to keep fighting. And more than anything, save yourself some time. Like, when I was in college, I was a freshman or sophomore. There was a girl who I met I didn't meet her on a dating app. I met her at the grocery store across the street from my university. I remember I didn't do all the things I just said. Like, I met her, I got her number, she invited me over on a Friday for, like, movie night. I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. She's gorgeous. Like, I think I'm cool. I'm going to show up at her place. And I showed up at her house, and it looked like the house on, like, any, like, Scooby-Doo movie. Like a 3-story house, very haunted looking. And I go in there, and I know that there are other people in the house. I just don't know where they are. I just know I hear stuff. But I'm young, so I'm like, whatever. She said, let's go to the basement and watch a movie. So we go to the basement and watch a movie. And I remember her uncle or somebody came downstairs, like, giant, portly fella. Like, tiny t-shirt on, belly button sticking out. Like, he looked like a like a giant baby. Like a 6'3" baby. Like, and he had Homer Simpson hair. Just real thin. Like, he looked like Charlie Brown. And he came in, and I remember thinking, we're watching this movie, I remember feeling like almost like a pressure to just stay casual and like not look alarmed at this giant man with barefoot and belly poking out just in the room with us now. And he comes and he sits down on the couch, like, adjacent from us. He doesn't, like, say anything. I don't feel unsafe. Like, I don't, like, he was a bigger fella. I didn't think he would catch me if he ever got aggressive. He sat down across from us and he just fell asleep and started snoring. And, like, she didn't react. So she was like, I guess you know this guy. And I remember being so uncomfortable with that. And I realized I met her yesterday and I'm in her basement with some random dude who looks like a retired or homeless Santa Claus. And I'm now with this person who I'm not in love with. I need a way out. And luckily, like, I'm not proud of this, but I just told her I had to go to the bathroom. And she was like, the bathroom's downstairs. And I was like, yeah. And I just went upstairs anyway and left the house. And, like, she texted me afterwards and, like, we made up. I let her know, like, I was uncomfortable. I didn't know her that well. I didn't know who Homer Simpson was sitting across from us. I needed to get out of there for my own safety, and I did. But I was lucky. Mm-hmm. But if you can avoid those situations, especially with people you were just meeting, you mitigate a lot of possible dangers in the future.
Mm-hmm. So, final thoughts, Captain Williams.
So, if you've been listening or just tuning in, try your best to recognize that there are both pitfalls and benefits to online dating, like app-based dating platforms. They're not bad. There's no such thing as a bad tool. It's just the user behind them. A hammer is a great way to build a house, but it's also a horrendous way to commit a murder. So, like, you can do a lot of terrible things with really awesome tools. And I think dating apps are some of those great tools we have for actually connecting in a way where we're seeking compatibility in an effective and very streamlined way while trying to do the things like work and go to school and do the things that matter to us. Even like parenting as a single parent or newly single person is helpful at any age. That being said, try your best to know what your goals are in the context of your relationship pursuits. Be transparent, present yourself accurately, and then be as safe as humanly possible so you don't end up putting yourself in a situation like I talked about in the last break, where I was in an uncomfortable house with uncomfortable people and I had to get out of there. If you can do those things, you give yourself a fighting chance, and you present yourself with an opportunity to, at the end of the day, whether you find love or not, you say you capitalized on every opportunity that was presented and given to you in a way that was meaningful, so at least you had, at the very minimum, a cool story to tell.